Bismillah Rahman Rahim. This is now the fourth video on the difficult MCQs for O-level biology. Difficult question. The graph shows how two different conditions affect the rate of photosynthesis. Now, rate of photosynthesis, now they've left this axis increase, which means what can there possibly? Which conditions are being altered in graphs 1 and 2? Now, in 1, you can see the rate of photosynthesis is increasing and then it levels off. Now, what can this be? This can only be two things: CO2 concentration in percentage or light intensity. Not light, it's light intensity. Now, in this situation, we have something is increasing and the rate is increasing, and then when the temperature increases, we can say whatever increases after this, then the rate decreases. Now, this has to be temperature. Why? Because rate of photosynthesis is dependent on enzymes, and the enzymes will be denatured. So, temperature graph is only going to be one in which the rate increases and then it decreases. In all the others, the rate will increase, but then it will level off, like in carbon dioxide concentration and light intensity. So that is why the answer was B, because this could have been either carbon dioxide concentration or light intensity, and this has to be temperature, couldn't be anything else. Graph 2 has to be temperature. Now another question: in a muscle, which two substances show net movement from the plasma into the tissue fluid? So this area between the capillary and the cell is the tissue fluid. So net movement means that which is more going in, less coming back in, net movement. So 100 going in, 10 returning. Now, what is in the blood? In the blood we have glucose, which reaches the muscle. In the blood we have oxygen, which reaches the muscle. So the answer is C. But why are these other wrongs? Because in A it is carbon dioxide and glucose. So carbon dioxide is going to be in this direction. Glucose is going to be in this direction. Then the other one is carbon dioxide and lactic acid. Lactic acid will be in this direction. Lactic acid produced in the muscle will enter the plasma. It won't be from the plasma into the tissue fluid. So lactic acid in both situations is wrong. Why is it wrong? Is lactic acid is made in the muscle, and from here the lactic acid will go back into the blood. So it diffuses from the muscle cell or the tissue fluid into the plasma. Another question which was tough: which statements about white blood cells is correct? They can ingest bacteria by a process called phagocytosis. Of course, this is correct. But why are these wrong? This one is the correct answer, but why is B wrong? They can produce antigens. White blood cells do not produce antigens. If a virus enters, it has antigens on its surface, which are surface markings like your face ID. So virus has antigens. The white blood cell cannot produce antigens. They produce antibodies. So there is a difference between antibody and antigen. Now, what is an antibody? Anti is a protein which is produced by lymphocytes. So this was the wrong answer. Was why is it wrong? I'm telling you why is it wrong. Then they convert fibrinogen to fibrin. That's the function of the platelets. That is not the function of the white blood cell. And here it is saying white blood cell. Then they transport toxins from the body tissues to the liver. No, I'm sure that doesn't happen. The toxins from the body tissues to the liver will be not possible for the white blood cells to do that. So that is why this is wrong. Now let's first revise inhalation and exhalation. Now you can see how the diaphragm changes, how the diaphragm shape changes. The diaphragm becomes more dome shaped or less dome shaped. So in inhalation, what is happening is that the volume of the chest cavity is increasing. So diaphragm moves downwards, rib cage moves upwards and outwards, and this increases the volume, so the pressure decreases, so air flows in from high pressure to low pressure. In exhalation, it's the other way around. The chest cavity, you see the diaphragm goes back into the dome-shaped position, so the volume decreases. Now, when the volume decreases, the pressure is going to increase and then air is going to move out. So in exhalation, the volume decreases, pressure inside the chest cavity increases, so air is going to move out from high pressure to low pressure. Now, if you look at this one, rib cage, upwards and outwards, downwards and inwards, contracts, moves, become thoracic cavity, become smaller, air pressure decrease, increase, and enter into the lungs and air forced out of the lungs. So this is exhalation and this is inhalation. So when you inhale in, what is going to happen? The rib cage moves upwards and outwards. So the muscles, the intercostal muscles contract and move the rib cage upwards and outwards. The diaphragm muscle contracts and becomes down and flattens up like this here. Thoracic cavity becomes bigger. So volume becomes bigger. Volume becomes bigger, so pressure decreases. So air will move in from high pressure to low pressure. Now in exhalation, we have the other way around. In exhalation, the rib cage goes down and inward, so the intercostal muscles uh, contract and bring the rib cage down and inward. Diaphragm relaxes and curves upward. So it relaxes, goes back to its original position. And the thoracic cavity becomes smaller in volume. So the air pressure inside increases and air is forced out of the lungs. Next question, again we are asking this. The graph shows how the pressure and volume inside the lungs changes during one complete breath. One inhale and exhale. At which point are the muscles of the diaphragm starting to contract? Because when they contract, it will become less dome-shaped. So the volume has to increase and the pressure will decrease. So air will move in. So that is why the answer is A. At the point where the volume is before, you see, because it says at which point are the muscles of the diaphragm contracts, so it becomes less dome shaped. So this is the point where you have to see where the volume, you see here what we are seeing is this is the volume graph. So the volume is increasing. So at this point, and here we see other graph which is showing the pressure. So pressure is decreasing. Because before, when the diaphragm muscle contracts, this is just prior to inhalation. Air moves in from high pressure to low pressure. That is why air doesn't move in a dead person, because the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm muscles are not working. You have to understand that. Another difficult question, which row describes the shoulder joint of an arm? Shoulder joint of an arm. So a shoulder joint is here. This is the shoulder joint. This is the elbow joint. They're asking you the shoulder joint. So bones, joint type, and action. So if you look at the joint type, I mean radius and ulna are here. So radius and ulna are here and here. Scapula and humerus. So is it a ball and socket joint? And it allows 360-degree movement. So it allows movement in all the planes. So that is why the answer is B. Is scapula and humerus. Radius and ulna will, of course, radius, ulna and humerus would form the elbow joint. Scapula, clavicle, humerus. We don't study clavicle so much. So scapula and humerus would be making the shoulder joint. It's a ball and socket joint. This one was a hinge joint. The elbow joint is a hinge joint. Another interesting question is the diagram shows a section through the eye in a pupil reflex. Now pupil reflex is in response to light intensity. If there is bright light or dim light. So in bright light, you know, of course, what is going to happen is if this is the eye, then the pupil, so this is the iris and this is the pupil. So the pupil constricts. So where will impulses go? Impulses will go to the muscles in the iris. So the impulses, they will go to the muscles in the iris which will contract or relax to allow more or less light to enter. But where are the effectors? The receptors, where are the receptors? So you've got to understand where are the light receptors, because the eye has receptors for light. Like in the skin, you have receptors for temperature and pain and pressure. Now that will be in the retina. The light can only be received by the receptors, which is the retina. The cells, the rods and cones in the retina will be the receptors for it. And where will it go? It will go to the iris. This is the iris. This is the muscles of the iris. So the iris is this. So you've got to understand is that is why the answer would be A, because the receptor would be 1 and effector would be 3. But if this was asking for accommodation for near and distant vision, if it was asking for near and distant vision, then of course the receptor would still be A. The receptor would still be A, but then it would be 4, because this would be the ciliary muscle which is involved in accommodation for looking at objects near or at a distance. Another interesting question, the diagram shows part of the nitrogen cycle Which arrow represents the action of the root nodule bacteria of leguminous plants? You see, leguminous plants have this capacity to convert atmospheric nitrogen, and that's why they do not depend on the nitrate content of the soil. They can make their own, they can use the air, the nitrogen in the air, and they can fix it, and they can convert it into ammonia, and then of course they can convert it into an amino acid. So they can live in nitrate deficient soils. Usually all other plants take nitrates from the soil. They take nitrates from the soil. So that is why A will be absorption by roots. C will be decaying remains to ammonia and ammonium carbonate. This is decomposing bacteria. Because in the nitrogen cycle, what we are doing is the nitrogen of the dead remains of plants and animals will be decomposed to ammonia and ammonium compounds. So these are decomposing bacteria or putrefying bacteria. Now nitrites to nitrates is, nitrite is NO2 and this is NO3. So these are nitrifying bacteria. But what we have to understand is in this question they're asking you nitrogen, what represents the action of root nodules. So bacteria of root node living in the root nodules can convert this. So that is why the answer to this was B, because it is converting the atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia and then into amino acids, and they can convert that. That's only leguminous plants like peas and beans and those which have the fruit is like a pod. Another question, cell X first divides by mitosis and then cell Y divides by meiosis. So cell X divides by mitosis. If it divides by mitosis, say it had 46 chromosomes. So then that means these will also have 46 chromosomes. But then it says cell Y divides by meiosis. So then this will have 23 because meiosis results in 4 cells and all will have 23. Because it says this cell Y divides by meiosis. So meiosis has two divisions, 46 to 23, 23, and then of course all of them will be 23. Well, actually because DNA replicates, so 46 chromosomes will be actually 92 chromatids, and then it will be 46, 46 in each. And because this 46 will have become 92 chromatids, so then of course each will have, the gametes have half the number of chromosomes, and these are called haploid. This cell, the one here at the top, is called a diploid cell, and when it divides by mitosis, each cells are formed diploid cells. So how does cell Z compare to cell X? Cell Z compare to cell X? Z does not have the same number of chromosomes, so this one would be correct or this one would be correct. And then it says genetically identical to cell X. No, it is not genetically identical to cell X. It is different to cell X. It has only half the number of chromosomes. So that is why the answer would be D. The diagram shows a section through the female reproductive system. So you can see these are the ovaries, and then this is the oviduct, and then this is the uterus. Now the question they've asked you is, during pregnancy, where does mitosis occur in the cells of the embryo? The cells of the embryo. So the ovum is released, which is haploid. So that has been produced by meiosis. The sperms deposit here, travel all this way and come and fertilize this. So when fertilization takes place, a zygote is formed. Now this zygote divides by mitosis and comes and sinks into here. And then mitosis is going to take place and is going to develop into an embryo and then a fetus. So basically embryo, it says where does mitosis occur in the cells of the embryo? Mitosis occurs, it will start in the fallopian tube and in the uterus. But meiosis will take place in the ovaries, and the sperms which have been produced in the testes, that also will be meiosis. So that is why the answer to this is C, because it only happens in X and in Z. X is the oviduct and Z is the uterus. Now reading this question, the table shows the genotypes and phenotypes for hair color for the members of a family, but one phenotype is shown incorrectly. Now when you look at it, it's brown. So what we have to understand is that the people who are brown, a big A, small a, or big A, big A. So brown people can be either this or they can be this. So this is the dominant trait. And the blonde people, they're given here is small a, small a. So brown, big A, brown, big A, small a. So all these are correct. But there's one, but if it's a blonde, blonde is homozygous recessive. So the blonde people must be homozygous recessive, but this is incorrect. So that is why son 1 was incorrect, is because it says incorrect phenotype. Phenotype means the physical appearance, blonde. How can he be blonde if it's big A, small a? Because people who are brown are big A, and big A, small a. So blondes have to be small a, small a. So this was where it was wrong, and this was where we had to see this one. Now you're very confused about these terms. A gene is a unit of inheritance that controls the production of, that's a syllabus point actually, controls the production of a protein. But let's discuss this. What is a chromosome? A chromosome is made up of wood. Like I say, this desk is made wood. A chromosome is made up of DNA. A chromosome is made up of DNA, right? If I say this desk is made of wood, this is the way chromosome is made up of DNA. And then what does it have? It has genes inside it. There are small portions of it which is called a gene. So this would be the gene for eye color. So chromosomes are made up of DNA, like we say proteins are made up of amino acids. Then allele means alternative forms of a gene, like there's a big B which results in brown eyes and small b which results in blue eyes. So these are alleles. Alleles means two different types of the same gene. We are talking about eye color. So what are the different alleles? Like I say, I have four different markers. So how are they different? One is green, one is red, one is blue, one is black. So for eye color, there are two different alleles. So allele is something which is a different alternative form of a gene. So you must know these differences so that whenever they ask you a question, you are able to do it. Last question, what is the result of natural selection? Natural selection, and what you have to understand is natural selection and artificial selection. Natural selection, environment changes, better adapted survive, and evolution occurs. Artificial selection, in which we artificially select the desired organisms and cross them and we get the offspring, and then you can repeat it over many generations, and that is for human benefit. So now human benefit, dogs that are friendly to human, this is a human benefit. Grapes that contain no seeds will sell with more money, so it's again human benefit. Then onion crops that have a pleasant taste sell more, so there's all human benefit. So these are all examples of artificial selection. These are all examples of artificial selection. So the only one left which is not of human benefit is the mosquitoes that are resistant to insecticides, because keep on spraying insecticides and their genetic information mutates, and now they are not going to be killed by this chemical which you have sprayed. So they are resistant to insecticides. So this of course is an example of natural selection. That completes this video on some of the difficult questions, and I hope this is going to be helpful, and best of luck for you for the tomorrow's exam. I want to thank teacher Lubna for helping me in this selection of these questions, and thank you very much Ms. Lubna, who has helped me in collecting these questions. Thank you, teacher Lubna, for helping me.